Hello and welcome to a conversation with myself, Amber, from the Grief Gang podcast. Today I'm going to have a lovely chat with two friends of mine and two inspirations of mine, Jack and Ben, the founders of the New Normal charity. Lads, hello, how are you?
Really
Well, that
nice.
lovely
That was
inspiration.
Much nicer than I anticipated.
What can I say?
Thank you very much.
That's very kind.
I can be nice sometimes to you.
All the time, don't be so bad.
How are you feeling about today? Thank you for asking me to be the host of this wonderful conversation.
Not at all. I don't think that we know anyone else who had this time free, actually.
And then I will say you're the best in the business. So
That's what I was looking for.
Obviously,
That's
yeah.
what I'm all looking
We're
for.
so appreciative
yeah,
of your time.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
thank you.
Of
I'm
course, always.
absolutely obliged to do it, even though 50% is grateful for it and 50% is not. But anyway, so we want to talk about all things the new normal today. We want to go from beginning to end and future. So there's a reason behind why the charity started. Well, there's two reasons why the charity started. Two very sad reasons. You know, there's nothing beating around the bush around it. It's very sad. So, Jack, how did your dad die?
my dad, Dave Baxter, died of skin cancer when he was 48. He was a bodybuilder, so he loved sunbeds and he just used them too much. And he had a bit of bad luck, I suppose, and never caught it. And he died in 2013 when I was 22. Left me completely out in the cold on my own with a grief I didn't know what to do with. Really only needed my dad. It's the only person I couldn't have. And I kind of muddled my way through, I reckon I always forget, 3 or 4 years before I met this man to the left of me. And I'm not going to step on his toes and tell his story, but that encounter that we had in, I think, 2016 was massive. 2015? 2015.
That's saying something, considering this guy always forgets the year his dad died.
But he always remembers the year that he met me. That's special.
That's
isn't it?
stunning.
That's
It's
special.
stunning.
It's actually because, so we met 13 months before my dad passed away. So my dad, Steve, was diagnosed with a brain tumour in the early summer of 2015, which is shortly before, I think about 2 weeks before Jack actually came in to get a haircut with me in my barber shop on Portobello Road at the time. And yeah, my dad had a 13-month battle with cancer, and unfortunately he obviously didn't survive, and that's kind of how we've ended up 5 years later where we are. But that chance encounter, came from Jack needing a haircut, and in his own words, actually I think I'll let him tell it in his own words.
Oh yeah.
Let's get into that, how you two met. I mean, I know there's two versions to the story, but for sake of professionalism,
let's tell the true.
we're going to just tell
the true story. My story. So I found Ben on Instagram by chance. No other way, just by chance. And I thought, he's a trendy looking guy. Obviously a little bit older than me, but not much. He's got tattoos. He's wearing Dr. Martens. Probably on the same wavelength as me. I'm going to travel all the way from Essex to Portobello Road, which is exactly what I did for a £45 haircut, which is exactly what I did. Sat in his chair, did what I do with everyone, even to this day, and chatted to him about my life, which included the fact that my dad's dead. And when I said that, Ben said, mate, my dad's dying. And that kind of set our friendship off on the right footing, I would say. Because I like talking to everyone about my dad, but not everyone understands. And that's, in essence, what we're about, isn't it? It's that understanding from one another, three of us here included, that what you're going through isn't as isolating as you think. So, that was the first step into our friendship.
Yeah,
I'd like to think that we had in the 20 minutes previous to that sort of built up pretty solid foundation to.
Yeah, like we both like football. We spoke about
Yeah.
back to the top of a bit.
I think that was. I mean, this is the interesting point, isn't it? Because that's what was relatable to us. We were speaking about football.
Yeah.
And then you spoke about your dad, and that was actually what got us to open up about our, about both our dads. And I mean, actually, that is what goes into what we do now, is that relatability, that kind of shared experience, that flows through every single one of our groups. But yeah, I think, sort of fast forward.
Before we fast forward. So when Jack left your chair, what happened? Did you exchange numbers? In that moment, did you just sort of think, that's a matey boy? Exactly. Because we always fast forward. We always fast forward this, but I wanted to know, once you trimmed his hair, you took his 45 quid for a steep haircut. What happened after that? Was it Let's stay in contact.
Do you know what? I remember
I just
something.
want to clear up. Actually, it was £39.
Yeah, it wasn't that expensive. It's only the £17 I had to spend on a train ticket to get there as well. But we'll forget about that.
Forget the travel costs.
I remember sitting in Ben's chair for a second time. I've never said this to Ben, but he said that we had mutual friends or someone that knew me. You were in a WhatsApp chat with them. It was a fantasy team WhatsApp chat.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned me, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he's a nice kid." And Ben was like, "No, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met." And I remember thinking, "Oh, that's lovely, isn't it?"
Yeah.
So you don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Way over his head.
At that time, I was like, "Oh,
Well,
it's
it sounds like a lie to me.
To be honest, it does a little bit. If I know Ben, it does a little bit.
oh, if you know Ben, as opposed
Yeah.
to me being a nice person as
True,
well." Yeah,
true.
yeah. No, and I remember thinking that's really sweet of him because we only had one conversation, and I think in that interim we did build a really firm relationship pre-TNN, pre-charity. We just, I'd been going through my own stuff as I did in my early 20s. Ben was, as I say, a little bit older than me, so he'd been through it himself.
Yeah.
So he acted almost in like a big brother role, which was
Yeah.
nice, but it wasn't a one-way relationship because the fact my dad had died, because we'd been through this pretty traumatic. What's he laughing at? We've been through this pretty traumatic thing
Yeah.
together and independent of one another.
Yeah.
I felt like I was able to help him as well.
Quickly before, obviously, so Wells, God's sake. Obviously, your dad had died, David died, and yours was dying.
Yeah.
And in that 13 months between, did you lean on Jack? Did you feel like, although he was younger, he was at a point where I've got the t-shirt, mate, come here. And did you, Jack, feel like you had to not guide Ben through, but you thought, I'm going to help my guy?
Before Ben speaks, I remember setting up the Dead Dad Club in my head and saying it out loud, and I remember when his dad died, him saying to me, "I've just joined the Dead Dad Club."
Yeah.
So that's my memory of that time, and beyond that I don't really remember much else. You'll answer that better than I can.
I mean, Jack and I have a really great relationship where each of us has helped one another through difficult moments, whether that's to do with death or whether that's to do with other parts of our life, relationships and wherever else. We've both helped one another, and having Jack at that point in my life was really important to me because yes, although it was an older brother, younger brother situation,
Dynamic,
and certainly then as well, Jack was a lot younger then. Jack was early 20s. Would have been about 24, 25 when
When I
we
met
met.
you, yeah.
Yeah, so Jack was a lot younger. I was turning 30, but it didn't. Jack was always there for me whenever I needed him, and not necessarily. And this is one of the really big things I think as well that's important about helping one another. Is not always giving advice. He was just there to listen to me.
Yeah.
And I could sit and say something to him and go, "Yeah, I get it, mate." And that's what I needed probably more than anything at that point in time.
Than just, empty,
We'd go for like monthly burgers, just to sit and what we call hold space now. It's what we say as a professional charity
It's
outfit.
weird, sort of back then, we wouldn't know what to say with it before holding space, but it really is, it's holding that space
That's
together.
exactly what we were doing without even really knowing, I suppose. We were just going.
Then I'm presuming that over one of these monthly burgers was when the glorious idea came.
Yeah, so again, this is sort of Jack's story to tell a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
As are most of our stories.
Go for it. Yeah. What is the I love how both of your everything with the charity. There's always two versions: Ben version, Jack version.
Well, this is, in fairness, this is the version.
They're real.
I was having a bad time, just in general, with my mental health. Not just the fact my dad wasn't here, just lots of things combining, and I had what I would consider a mental breakdown in January 2018, and my lovely mum, who we all love and adore, Gloria Gaynor Baxter, she said to me, "Look, enough's enough. I found this anxiety retreat," and it sounds a little bit left field, but it really worked for me, and we had this residential, me and her, with some really wonderful people, and they empowered me into owning me and who I am and why I am and what I am. So, I still live with anxiety, but I'm proud of that. And what I was able to do in those 3-4 days was recognise that holding space with Ben is something that helps me. So I said to him over burgers in Hoxton, just around here, I was like, "Look, let's do something." I didn't think it was a charity. I didn't know what it was, but let's have a conversation. Let's you and I speak so much about our dads. There must be other people in this world that
Yeah.
want to do the same. And initially, I was like, I want to take this conversation to the hospice that cared for my dad. And Ben went, good idea, but let's go bigger. Let's take it into London, and that's exactly what we did. We took our conversation. We didn't know what it was at that point, aside from the fact that I went, let's call it Good Grief.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, that's not a bad
That'll
shout.
do.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. Let's take these Good Grief sessions into London and see what
Well, I
happens.
don't even think that they were Good Grief sessions. It was just let's
just
you
get
know, let's
together.
put something on. And
Yeah.
We didn't know what it was, did we? Let's be honest.
No, we had no
That's where
idea.
the best things start.
Well,
I mean, we put we put a post on Instagram, and I remember putting the post out, and we said that, and it was as simple as we always speak to one another about the people that we've lost,
Yeah.
you know, and we want to do that for other people as well. We want to bring people together in a room.
Mm-hmm.
It was that straightforward, and we had, you know, a wonderful amount of people get in touch and say what a great idea it was and how much they wanted to, you know, come and support what we were doing.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what we were doing. We legitimately had absolutely no
Going
idea.
blind, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we took it from there. I mean, we that first meeting, and we were really fortunate. An old friend of mine who used to run a
community centre.
There we
community
go.
centre. Yeah, thank you. Always drops out of my head. I've no idea why. Used to run a community centre in Angel in North London. So you know, he said, I've got this space. You know, he got in touch with me and said, I've got this space. If you want to use it, you can use it. And we said yes, because we had nowhere else.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can honestly say I've never felt as anxious in my life as I did that day.
Yeah.
I bought so many biscuits on the way
Biscuits
there.
make everything better.
Yeah. But I bought all of these biscuits, and we had no idea. We had no idea who was going to turn up, how many people were going to turn up, because so many people had got in touch to say they were coming. And so we were like, could be one, it could be 100. We have, you know, we really didn't know. And we stood there and we waited, and I think about 6 people turned up. If that, 5 maybe.
Yeah, it's a murky number in my head. I had maybe 10.
Very long time ago.
It was
now.
nearly 3 years ago, actually.
I
Yeah.
can see four other people.
You
now.
see their
They-
faces,
It's
yeah.
basically Ben and I, my brother, and some people that Ben knew. You know, it wasn't
Yeah.
like we'd got people too.
Actually, there was one person in that room that neither of us knew. There was one person in that room, and she had been brought by someone who I knew.
Okay.
And she had recently lost her mum, and we sat in that room, and Jack didn't stop talking.
2 hours of me just.
That's dreamy,
Honestly.
that's dreamy.
Well, do you know what it was? It was like taking the muzzle off a dog. I was like, oh my god.
It's when you give permission, when you've been given permission to go,
Yeah.
that feeling and those topics that you not or normally felt by society to be like, don't talk about that. When you're amongst 5 or 6 other people who go, no, you're sweet, you can do that. It's word vomit.
I felt alive. I remember to this day how I felt. I remember vividly. I don't think I'll ever forget that liberating feeling of like, this is our space for us to talk about our people, and my like still so proud of my dad and everything he was to me and everything I was to him, and I was just given that permission to let loose, and I didn't have the prior knowledge because we didn't know what it was, and I did talk a lot in that first meeting, but it helped, and it's been helping for 3 years ever since.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean-
Well, let's not skip past the 3 years. Let's go
No,
through.
absolutely.
Absolutely not. There's been so many amazing things, and so from meeting one, so you've come out there. You probably need a drink because you've spoken so much.
I had sweaty hands.
And
dry
sweating,
mouth.
farming.
Yeah.
What did you feel like, Ben, coming out of it?
Just full of adrenaline.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a rush. I mean, you know, you've attended a first meeting
I'll get to
yourself.
mine. I'll
Yeah.
get to mine, but yeah.
So you know that adrenaline that you get from the conversations that you had in that room is incredible. You're filled with so many different emotions, you know, and I felt really elated, and I was so grateful. I was grateful for the space. I was grateful for my friend Will, for the people who turned up to speak. I was happy that Jack had other people to talk to about his dad at last.
Just chill.
And unfortunately, we had to wait another 3 months until meeting 2.
But what's great about that, and I love this as part of the story, is that we had the space when the Zumba class or the yoga class or the spin class hadn't been booked, which is just brilliant.
Spin makes it sound like it was really fancy. It
Well,
was just
yeah.
Zumba or like
Yeah.
Just like the
yoga.
But it was
ladies
brilliant.
doing their
It was
Zumba.
brilliant,
Yeah.
and it was exactly as you'd imagine. It was a sign that we printed off of the computer with a bit of sellotape stuck on the door. It was biscuits
The
in the
rigid
middle.
chairs.
Yeah, it was.
Plastic
It was
chairs.
good grief meeting number one.
Yeah.
It was perfect in its imperfect ways.
Yeah.
But it was, it was a buzz. You're right. It was
Yeah.
adrenaline and it was a buzz.
Absolutely. So then you had to wait 3 months to then book the next one. So then you've done that. And then, so they all just sort of carry the same format. When did you sort of start maybe finding your rhythm and your, I'd say as far as style, but no, because by the time I got to you, we were at WeWork.
Yeah.
Do you
And
know
that
what?
seemed pretty established then.
I would say as well, I think to our credit, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this was on purpose, more that I think we'd found something good from the get-go, is that the style was never really changed. Like it just
It
hasn't.
hasn't from meeting one.
Aside from the fact that I talk a lot less, we still go around the circle, we introduce ourselves one by one and our people.
Yeah.
There is no pressure to talk, and we don't insist that you do speak, and it's always flowed so well that the rhythm was found when Ben and I said, look, this is great, and we're so appreciative of Will and the Arc Centre and Angel, but we want to kick on. We need a more permanent home, and I put something out on Twitter, and a guy I went to university with, big up Freddie Case.
Yeah, big up
who we
Freddie.
love.
So you're going to say we love Freddie?
We love Freddie Case. We follow each other on Twitter because we went to uni together, and he said, look, he worked at the time for WeWork. I'd love to help. And before we knew it, we had a meeting a month, wasn't it, in WeWork in Devonshire Square, and it was a more permanent home. So rather than go one every 3 months, we were then on to one meeting every month, and it was a more rigid structure. We felt like we were kicking on, taking that next step.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I actually think, and what's quite interesting here is that I remember us being around about meeting 8, and sometimes we weren't 100% certain how to go into the second half of a meeting, or sometimes we would struggle a little bit to open the meetings.
Just quickly, for a bit of context, sort of explain, so how would the in-person meetings go? Would be, it was 2 hours, correct? And you'd have a little break.
2 hours. So there'd be we tried to make it about half the way through, but it normally, sometimes it would be a bit earlier, sometimes it would be a bit later. But essentially, it would be a 2 hour meeting, sit down in a room. I think the most we had, in fact, actually, this was a big turning point for us. But about 21 turn up to an in-person meeting, and we thought we need to do more.
Yeah.
And we started going to 2 a month. And it was around about, I would say it was probably around about the 2 a month mark, which was about a year in, that we really started to find our feet. Topics of conversation were slightly easier to come by. And also as well, people were coming back a little bit more regularly, so they were also finding their feet and finding their confidence in talking. We saw a lot in the early days, because Jack and I were in every meeting then. Jack and I were at every single one. And we saw a lot in the early days. People would come for 3-4 meetings and they wouldn't say a word. They'd introduce themselves and then they'd sit and listen. And then they'd start to find their voice. I find it quite different now. People seem to open up a little bit earlier. And we'll get on that in a minute. But back then, it took a little bit longer, and you'd see the same faces more regularly back then. It would have been January 2019 when we first met you. Was it February?
February.
So we
cold
just.
day.
It wasn't 19, was it? Was it last year?
Yeah.
2020.
Oh,
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of 2019, we had a conversation. And we said throughout January and February, which is our busiest time of the year, because people are more inclined to sort of come along at that
It's
time.
reflective time,
Yeah. So we said, right, we're going to go to weekly. So we changed from the beginning of 2020 to weekly meetings in person, and then obviously we met you.
I made the video for you to say you're going weekly.
You did.
And what a moment that was.
Wow.
It's very exciting.
And yeah.
That was pre-COVID.
That was
such a long while ago.
pre-COVID, and I'll just speak very briefly of my experience of coming to Good Grief, and obviously I met you both on more of me interviewing you for my podcast.
Brilliant podcast, by the
And
way.
obviously,
The Grief
come
Gang.
on, come on.
The best podcast ever.
Lovely little plug there.
Well, I'm just speaking as a fan.
Doted that. But I reached out to you guys, and we got a date in the diary, and I come down and we recorded. And I think we went way over time. We spoke for hours. We spoke
Yeah,
for
we
a
did.
good old while. A good while.
It's great that.
And it got to about 6:30. And I remember, Jack, you said, we actually have a session tonight. Stick around. And I went, do you know what? Cool, yeah, I'm not
Got nothing better to do.
Yeah, literally, got nothing better to do, so I'll stay. And I did. And I remember I wasn't really, not in the mindset, but I just sat down in this room and there was about, how many in that one?
Probably about 12.
About 12,
There's
yeah.
a good amount in that, I remember.
And I remember in that moment, up to that point, I felt very comfortable with my story and talking about my mum and speaking about my story. And then as we went around the room and we were speaking, and I said, "Hi, Amanda, I'm here to remember my mum, Sue." And I said it, and I'll never forget it, and I'm not going to go into name whatever, but I remember it went to one person, and she said her name, and she couldn't get out her loved one's name. And I remember that gets emotional now. It destroyed me because I thought spaces like this are so necessary for people like her, and even people like me who are comfortable and doing the work that I do. I'm comfortable with it, but Amber, you have to remember that there are people who still struggle and they're not as where you are, and spaces like this are necessary. And as that hour went on and we spoke about so many different things and the debate and like the healthy conversation, I remember just sitting there and almost a little bit out of body, and I was like, this is wicked. This is absolutely wicked. And I said to myself, I'm coming back. I'm absolutely coming back. And then a pandemic.
She never did. She never did come back. She came to that one in-person meeting.
More than that, I've never left. Never left, have I now? But no, let's go. So obviously, we've gone up from beginning first meeting throughout to now. We're going into lockdown.
As we went into lockdown, the last meeting we hosted in person was our 40th meeting.
Yeah.
Which we thought was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Little did we know what was about to happen.
We'll speak about that. So so you're used to now weekly Devonshire Square every week. You've then now been thrown, obviously, as we all with the pandemic, going, okay, we need to shake things up. How are we still going to provide support to these people? We can't see them in person.
So we obviously immediately, Jack and I spoke. We had the conversation as well with James, who James is the third founder, who is very much behind the scenes. But we had the conversation between the three of us, and we thought we don't know how long this is going to go on for, and we still need to support the people that need the support of our charity, especially now. So we arranged a Google Hangout call, which none of us knew anything about at the time.
Zoom
we put it on Freddie as the tech guy, and he's absolutely not technical in any way. But we said to Freddie,
No, Freddie's useless at tech. He's just a lot less useless than we are.
He's just the most technological
of the group,
trustees, which is not a high bar. So Freddie, who had used it before, set up a call for us, and I think you were on that.
I think I was on the first test one. The test one.
But we did a test call, and I remember, because I wasn't very well, I had COVID, and it was the first Monday that we'd gone into lockdown. We did a test call, and after that test call, we posted straight away on Instagram, said that we were going to be doing virtual calls from the following Monday. And initially, we thought we'll do one call, and we posted about it. And then we had about 50 people sign up. Yeah. So we had to split into 2 calls. And that's how Group A and Group B, so Good Grief, Virtual Good Grief, Group A and Group B, were started. 2 calls every single Monday at the beginning of the pandemic. And initially, we had no idea how this was going to go on, like anyone. Yeah. But it kept going, and people kept turning up. And the calls looked very much the same as they did in person. I really liked them from the beginning. I felt that they were a really good way for people who maybe didn't feel as comfortable being in that space. They could turn up, they could listen, they could switch their camera off. They didn't have to add anything. And also sort of a really lovely thing that I like about virtual meetings is that people can have conversations and they can share their stories in the chat function without actually having to speak out. So they can find their confidence and they can find their voice through that. And
it's almost a separate conversation, isn't it? And I think as well, massively, and this is something that we must appreciate about virtual calls, is that when we took them online, we assumed we'd get someone from Newcastle or someone from Manchester that wasn't able to come to the in-persons in Devonshire Square in East London. And we did, but we also got someone from Paris.
Yeah.
And we've since had people from Bermuda
It's
and
amazing.
Sri Lanka and Australia, and we have hosts in the States. And it's, that to us really is the value in what we're doing right now, is that we are reaching all four corners of the globe. And it's amazing, because what we were perhaps wrong in thinking was that this was a London-centric charity.
Yeah. People only grieve in London. Do you know?
Well, we just
People
didn't-
only people die in London.
Do you know what it was? It's that, but I think we just didn't know.
For
from the
you,
start.
I think it was, and I remember having a conversation with you when you went virtual. You kind of said, "I wish we didn't. Why did we do this before?"
Right, exactly.
But it's
But
But you
world
did
it doesn't
know,
matter.
no.
You did,
Yeah,
yeah,
the world-
exactly.
the world
None of us
didn't
knew.
know.
None of us
Yeah.
And we
knew
won't stop. Now that it's begun, we
Exactly.
can't stop, because it's
what's come of
it's
it.
turned into something
And even
amazing.
for me, as we went virtual, obviously I'd only attended one in person. I was reeling over that. I was gagging to get back to it in person. So when it was virtual, I had my apprehensions. I thought, I don't know, is that same connection? But then I remember, believe it or not, I did take a bit of time to warm up and actually talk in a session properly. But I was one of those people. I did kind of feel probably one or two times, stay quiet, and then I was like, I've got something to say, and I want to say it in this group. And I've never shut up since. And
I'm
I
so
can't
thankful for
stop.
that.
But I now see it now with new people who attend, and I watch them, they come and the cameras are off, or they stay muted for a while, and I'll keep coming back, and as time, they'll be like, actually, can I say something? Can I add?
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful to see people flourish in such a safe environment.
What I think is really beautiful as well is the journey, obviously, that you're speaking about. But that's, the next step of that journey is we have people who came to those initial virtual meetings with their cameras off, who are now hosts.
Yeah,
They
that
run
evolution
meetings,
is
yeah.
insane.
The confidence that it builds is
Yeah.
sensational, even between, in both of us.
Yeah.
It was a completely alien
Yeah.
thing for us back in the day.
And I think as well, the confidence that it builds, not just only in the room, of taking that confidence into everyday life.
Yeah,
That's what I found is,
absolutely.
with Grief Gang stuff and charity stuff, there's conversations after that have gone, us having that conversation in that meeting, that made me actually want to go and address that thing my friend
Sure.
said. I wanted to speak openly about it with my work colleagues.
Yeah.
It's not just happening on that screen, it's happening in everyday life now.
It's empowerment.
Yeah.
It's empowerment to the individual, and this is what we talk about. We've been saying this more recently, but a quiet revolution. It's the idea of changing the world quietly.
Yeah.
And people come into these spaces and they have these conversations about people they care about, people that have passed away, or now with some of the newer meetings, just coming in and speaking about their mental health and how to manage that.
Yeah.
And then they go back into their families, their colleagues, their friendship groups, and they are able to educate those people around them as well, to teach them the things that they've learned in these meetings, to be able to speak openly around them in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before.
Yeah.
And quietly that starts to change those communities, and collectively we believe very much that we can change the world through these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on there about the other spaces. Let's speak about that, because there's so many more branches and groups on the side. Do you reckon if I put you on the spot, you remember more of them? I'm joking. Come on. I was going to put you on the spot and ask how many hosts do you have, would you?
Can you do it in order of
Yeah.
the meetings that we added? I mean, I know that I
You know,
can.
the number one was...
Yeah, well, that's it. Straight away, we launched Black and Brown
Yeah.
with Amber Jeffrey.
Mhm.
That was an incredible place for us all to be
Yeah.
together, and we were so
That
proud to have
conversation
watched
was,
you
yeah.
flourish and you create that space for people that needed that so desperately, and that was first. So it's really quite hard to believe that just over a year ago we had one meeting.
I know.
That's,
Yeah.
you don't really see it and
On a
think about that a
Monday.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we've got Black and Brown Good Grief, which came first. Then we had Group C,
Yeah.
so it's still a Good Grief session.
Mhm.
Group C, so we added another Good Grief, so that's 4 meetings.
Yeah.
Then we added,
Queer Good Grief.
no, It's
Oh,
Complicated.
look
was
at
next,
him.
wasn't it?
He knows him, but he won't help out.
It's Complicated was next.
Yes.
It's Complicated is
Okay, so
a
that's
Good Grief session, and that's for complicated grief. It's for people that have lost people through suicide or addiction or strained relationships. Then we added Queer Good Grief.
No, then we added Boys Talk.
Then we added Boys Talk,
Keep
which is
up, guys.
which is it's a men's mental health peer-to-peer support group, much the same format as Good Grief.
Yes.
Then we added
Then
Queer
it
Good
was the
Grief,
break Queer
yeah.
Good Grief.
Queer Good Grief is a good grief session for the queer community.
Yeah.
Then we added
Girls Talk.
Girls Talk, which is the girls' mental health group.
Yeah.
And then we added this month Lockdown Loss, which is a group specifically for for people that have lost their people during the pandemic. But also
That's
we run
7 new groups.
we also run a
7
host
groups.
meeting,
7 new groups.
and we run a host meeting once a
Yes,
month as
yeah,
well.
and our host meeting for us guys, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially we have 7 meetings, 7 different meetings that people can attend.
Mm-hmm.
A range of different meetings for lots of different types of grief and for lots of different communities as well, because we recognise that there's, sometimes people aren't as comfortable sitting in certain rooms and sitting around certain people having conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes, they want to be in a space where they feel more represented.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important for us to make sure that people feel represented, to make sure that they feel safe.
Absolutely.
So which is why we've done that.
All these different groups, yeah. And it's, grief, we all know the pain of grief and that hole and that emptiness. There's so many nuances, there's so many layers. So having dedicated groups with dedicated different types of grief, but as we say, to go into a room and feel fully represented or it's being seen in.
And
your
there are
entirety.
different types of grief
Yeah.
as well. There are different types of grief. I mean, now we run 23 meetings a month.
Mm.
So we've gone from the beginning of the pandemic, 4 meetings a month in March 2020, to April 2021. We ran 23 meetings. We've hosted over 200 meetings, so from 40 to over 200. We've met nearly 1,000 young people from around the world. And it's not just young people now as well. We have people of all ages or adults of all ages coming into, Boys Talk and Girls Talk and the other space as well. And it's a really incredible trajectory over a 12-month period, which we could never have imagined.
Yeah.
We were excited that you had come from nearly Brighton. And as Jack touched on earlier, we now have a host who lives in Las Vegas.
It takes me back to meeting number 1
Yeah.
in the community centre in Angel, like not knowing what to expect. And there's an element of that from the get-go. We listen, we hear, we understand to a point. We just want to make sure everyone's heard. That's bottom line, what we do. And 23 meetings a month isn't enough.
Yeah.
That's the thing with us and CNN. That it's great, but it's still not enough.
Yeah.
And we will keep striving to make sure that everyone is heard from all over the world for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, we recognise the privilege that we have as 2 young men who were able to start a charity. We're able to just one day decide, we're going to start a charity.
Yeah.
We have to use that to be able to provide the spaces for all of the millions of people that otherwise aren't getting that space that they need. They're not getting the space that they need to have conversations.
Yeah.
Our meetings are completely free. They will remain completely free. They are peer-to-peer. They are for people with shared experiences to come together, to speak openly and honestly, to communicate with one another, and to empower one another. And they'll continue to do that. And as Jack says, 23 meetings is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
When we know that people in every single corner that we can reach are supported, well, then we'll keep going.
Your job is done.
We'll keep going.
I don't think our job will ever be done. To be
No,
honest.
it's true. It's
I
true.
don't think it
It will
will.
never be done.
No.
So, as much as the mission is to help other people, what does TNN do for you and your grief?
I'll go first.
It's so, Anna. It's so when you put yourself and you are continuously holding the space.
I was going to say, we've only got about 10 minutes left. Right, listen, I can speak this week having had a phenomenal experience with my own grief and the loss that I don't talk about much. On Wednesday night, I spoke from the heart, and it opened me up in ways that I've not been opened up in a long while. I hosted the group, but I felt heard and supported. And 3 years on, I felt exactly as I did on day 1. From in 2018 when we hosted our first meeting, I came out. I had adrenaline coursing through me. I was on high. I was buzzing. I was just like, this works.
Yeah.
This is nuts. It's great. It works. And I feel heard. I feel supported. I feel understood. And I didn't feel these things before I met Ben. I didn't feel these things before I met Ben because, I didn't have the space where I could. I've got great friends who I speak to all the time about my dad, but not necessarily anyone that understood what it was like to lose a dad.
Just get it.
No, that's
Just
right.
get
And
it.
you,
'Cause the ones who just get it, we don't even have to say anything. You just look and you go, I like
well,
that
that's
face.
it. You know, we take that in every week to a meeting and say, this happened to me this week, and someone in the chat or someone will put their hand up and go, yeah, me too. I understand, that resonates. And that gives me a sense of belonging when it comes to my dad and whatever grief I'm experiencing that week. And, you know, as much as we're co-founders, I'm very much a big attendee and supporter of this format, peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
I've had all sorts of therapy and anxiety retreats. This is the thing that's worked the most. This is the thing
This is one that's stuck.
well, it works. It
Yeah.
absolutely works. We fumbled our way into this kind of amazing format, and it's very much ours, and we're very proud of it, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would be hesitant to say that we fumbled. I think that we,
At the start, perhaps we fumbled.
I think we've you know,
Learning. I think learning is better.
We didn't know at the start.
I think, yeah, I mean, we probably didn't, but at the same time, I mean, I don't want to credit us too much because that's not what we do. But you know, we've created this space, and we'll continue to create this space. And you know, for me, I mean, my dad's life meant everything to me. Now his death means just as much, and you know, that for me is the driving force here. Is that hopefully, long after I die, you know, people will still. I don't want them to talk about me. I want them to talk about him.
Yeah.
I want them to know the reason they're there is because of Steve May, because of a guy who laid 1,000 bricks a day, who was strong as an ox and could dance.
Yeah.
You know, and I want people to know that. You know, and that's important. That my dad's life and his death meant so much to so many people, and also as well for me on a day-to-day basis, this gives me the opportunity to learn about myself and learn about other people. You know, this gives me the opportunity to take my experiences and hear about other people's experiences, and to kind of push boundaries of conversation that, you know, in other places I can't necessarily have. And for me, as much as every other person in that room, it's empowering. For me, as much as every other person in that room, it's educational. You know, and if it wasn't for TNN, and if it wasn't for Good Grief and Boys Talk and, you know, the meetings that I attend, then I wouldn't be able to say that I was on the journey of evolution that I'm on.
Yeah. Wow.
What does it mean to you? Because I think we've probably got 5 minutes.
God.
Because, you know, as someone that hosts our meetings, you know, what do those spaces mean to you?
Words are quite feeble, and it's when you go from attendee to host, you might think, oh, but no, I come in as attendee. And even as most recently on Thursday with our Black and Brown group, I attended, and there's something about when you get to a place when you know you can say something and you can fully say, I don't want an answer back, I just want to share this with you. And I shared it with the group, and I cried and I cried and I cried. And half me expected to, I don't know, I just cried and I cried, and I felt so safe. The room was silent, but it wasn't awkward silence. It literally felt that it was virtual. I was being hugged from these attendees. And I cried and I cried, and they said thank you. I said thank you for doing that with me, Amber. Thank you for being vulnerable with me. And I said thank you for letting me. So having spaces to do that, as much as I'm strong and I'm vulnerable, and having a space where I can be both and I can lean into both of those is absolutely wonderful for me.
Nice one.
So thank you.
No.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I know what you mean, and I had a similar experience on Wednesday, and it's like those faces looking back at you, and you just feel, you're right, it's the support of...
You don't feel, stop, don't do this, like, stop crying.
No.
And I did that. I tried to stop myself because of just maybe like imposter syndrome a little bit, going, shouldn't do this. But I looked back at those faces on the screen, and it wasn't the pity till it was, I've got your back.
Understand it.
I've got you.
And it's hard to find that.
It kept coming and coming and coming, and it was going. And I left, and blurry eyes and puffy face, but I was like, I'm so glad I did that. And they're not all tears all the time in the groups. There's laughter. I've laughed in those groups sometimes. Dark humour. Just, I don't know what I'd do without it. I don't know what I'd do with all the spaces. The friends that I've made for life from them. I'd be lost without it. And long may it continue. And I'm very proud of you both. I'm very proud to be a part of it as well.
Well, we echo that right back. Very proud of you, and thanks for helping us today and asking us these questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, whoever is watching. I hope that has answered all your questions for the New Normal charity. I've been your host, Amber Jeffrey, and this is Jack Baxter and Benjamin May, TNN founders.
Nice one, AJ. Thank you very much.